everybody, and welcome to the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Forrest. Time to smash it up on a women's basketball night. This might devolve into some type of watch party if the second half of the current basketball game that's being played in the Spokane region continues to be awesome. It is right now, but we're going to talk a lot about the spring football camp this coming hour here on Warchant TV. He's Ira Schafel, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. Welcome one, welcome all. Hit the thumbs up as you enter the program tonight. All right, Ira, this is the first one we've had with spring practice. It feels, I guess, a little different, but it's just been, press conferences and intel and all that kind of stuff. How's it going tonight?
It's going good. As you said, man, that first half was pretty impressive. FSU is trailing 50 to 49. Tania Latson at 23 in the first half. So the Noles are going for the upset in Baton Rouge. You said it's the Spokane Regional, but they're playing in Baton Rouge. And huge crowd. I think they said Kim Mulkey bought 2,000 student tickets. So it looks like a packed house, and they're playing really well. So it's cool to see FSU. They make the tournament every year, but it would be really cool to see them notch a win like that.
So we'll keep tabs on that as the program goes on tonight. Again, they're at halftime right now. If things turn into interesting mode for third quarter, fourth quarter, we will keep you up to date here on Warchant TV. We're going to talk a lot about what we've heard around the program, what we've heard directly from those associated with the program. Mike Norvell, player interviews over the last week. If you have questions for us as it pertains to spring camp, we'll do our best to answer those for you over the course of the next hour. But I think it's just going to be a good way to start, Ira, where we and thanks, West in the Villages. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's correct. Over 50,000 subscribers to Warchant TV. All right. Thank you, everybody out there. I want to be able to, Ira, before this is all said and done, fill Doak with the amount of subscribers that we have.
That'll be nice.
That would be a pretty cool achievement. Right now, we do, I think, what Miami does every other year when we go down there for a game in their building. I think that's about the attendance.
50.
About 50K. But I wanted to ask you, as we start tonight, just general thoughts on what you've heard. You've got a lot of years of experience at these first weeks of camps to draw, little nuanced points from. What do you think about what's going on so far and what you've heard surrounding spring football camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking to people around the program, I think a lot of people around the program. This is not necessarily coaches, but it's people around the people, support staff, people around the program, people that are watching the practices that we're not watching. Even they are probably, cautiously optimistic, that I think people, because nobody expected 2-10, nobody expected the season to go off a cliff the way it did. I don't think it was a shock that they didn't play great right off the bat, but the way the season just evolved. And, as I've said, and we've talked about, they got worse and worse as the year went on, not necessarily because of injuries, but just because the team just kind of fell apart. And then you end up having to fire a bunch of coaches and go in a new direction. So even though I think people are optimistic by what they've seen so far, I'm hearing a lot of positive things, a lot of individual players being singled out. They've only had one day in pads so far. They practiced last, was it Wednesday and then Friday and Saturday, or Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday, whatever. They practiced 3 times in 4 days. And, only one of those is in pads. And so, there's not a ton to gather in terms of how physical the team. That's what everybody wants to know. How physical are they going to be? How much better is the line of scrimmage going to be? Those are a little hard to tell in the first few practices. But, I think there's a lot of things people have really liked so far. But everybody's kind of, tapping the brakes just because, we all saw what happened not too long ago.
I'm going to hit a promo very, very early in the program, and it's not for State Farm agent Russ Forrest. Russ, hang in there. We're going to promo you in just a minute. But because we have it on the site right now, on the front page of Warchant.com, a feature we're calling Sources Say on Warchant.com. This is a time to promote that we have an excellent spring special going on this week for you if you want to sign up for Warchant.com. You will save over 50% of the cost of an annual membership to Warchant.com, and we're going to welcome you with even more, $20 to Garnet and Gold. It's a gift code that will appear in your inbox a few days after you sign up and all your processing is done. But head to Warchant.com, go to the upper right-hand corner, click Join Now, and this spring special will be there. We call it $1 a week, $52 for 12 months of Warchant.com plus a welcome gift. We can't divulge everything we say on that particular feature, for it would devalue it completely, Ira. But, it does sound like there is some serious positivity, especially surrounding a lot of the transfers that have come in on campus. I would think that if you're able to get a source within the program who watched practice last year, they would know what, and the program behind the scenes, they saw what was going on. They would know what bad was. They would know what red flags are because of trial and error and a lot of error last year. So for a lot of people around the program to be a little bit more optimistic, I think they're seeing more than what they saw in last year's version of camps, practices, meetings, all those things behind the scenes. That would be the tell to me, is that, for example, James Williams is one player that we talked about, and you brought it up today on the Jeff Cameron show. Motor for James Williams looks a little bit more like what was going on a couple of years ago in this program.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you really, you could probably hang your hat on that. Not necessarily know. James Williams is a guy who, had limited action in Nebraska. He was kind of a pass rushing specialist, kind of a third down guy, was not an every down player. So they're trying to make him into an every down player this year. And Terrence Knighton, the new defensive line coach, is very confident that he can be that. He's put on 15 or 20 pounds. He looks more solid than he did just, even when he got to Tallahassee a few months ago. So there is excitement and confidence that he can be that kind of guy. But until you see it, you don't really know. I mean, how's he going to handle some of the things he'll see on running downs? Teams are trying to run the ball at him. We'll have to see. But, the motor is something that people really are excited about. And that's the thing about Braden Fisk. And, not to compare him to Braden Fisk, but the thing with Braden Fisk was he made plays after the initial play. And I think when you look at the problems last year, I mean, Braden Fisk made a lot of plays with his first, moves, and he obviously made plays in the backfield. But a lot of times he made plays after, maybe his initial moves didn't work. The play got extended. Maybe they go the other way, but he's chasing it down. He makes the play from behind. That's, we saw Jermaine Johnson do that a few years ago when he was at Florida State. Sounds like James Williams has that kind of a motor, and that is something that translates because, the plays aren't going to go the way you want them to go. But I think that was the frustration for a lot of FSU fans last year was if those defensive ends didn't make a play with their first move, it didn't seem like they were going to make a play on that play. And whereas it seems like James Williams is a guy that has that motor, and you like the fact that he's constantly getting pushed by these coaches. They knew him at Nebraska, and that's something it's a good example for the other defensive linemen to see, including some of these transfers. They brought in several defensive line transfers, and if James Williams is a guy that sets the standard, that would be huge for them.
I'm going to stick with him just because he was interviewed last week. He was made available to the media, and he spoke on being very thankful for the team at Florida State in terms of nutrition, strength and conditioning. He said his fiance is a nutritionist as well. So he's got this whole team effort about helping him shape his body to be able to be more of a 3-down defensive lineman. He said he's in the 260s now, Ira. That's where he's listed, put on 20 pounds. He does, at least even from the cropping of the video interview. Like, you're in the room with him, so this is why I'm asking you, but he does look larger. Did you get that sense versus newcomer interviews to now?
No, definitely, both in his upper body and also in his lower body. And, when he was here, when we did the newcomer interviews in January, you just were like, man, this is a lanky dude, right. And you could see why he was a pass rushing specialist, but he's got that frame where he could put on more weight. It's not like he's maxed out right now in the 260s. So you could see him possibly being a guy that is a 270-pound defensive end, 275-pound defensive end. And the cool thing is, from what we're hearing, he still runs really well. Like, he's carrying that weight really well. And again, I would trade off a little bit of size, especially if he's going to be an every down guy. I mean, that was the thing about, Jared Verse and Jermaine Johnson, those guys, they could do everything. You didn't have to they weren't only pass rushing specialists. And that's what they're hoping this guy can be.
And, of course, Darrell Jackson has been challenged as well. He was made available to the media last week. I guess we can go through many of these interviews, not all of them. But it seems like Darrell understood the assignment, at least if he was going to come back. And I'm not talking about the draft hype and top 10 pick hype, because that's nice, as Mike Norvell said, Ara, that's nice to put on a little quotable that don't come back unless you're going to be a top 10 draft pick. But the idea being of investing a little bit more, being more of a leader. Darrell was fairly forthright as he was speaking on that specific topic about what was lacking last year. For what it's worth, I think we've documented this. We both agree. Darrell was one of Florida State's better players in the second half of the season when a lot of guys might have been, easing off the gas a little bit. I thought he was somebody who finished strong. But they're asking more out of him, and they're asking more out of James Williams. What sense do you get about Darrell Jackson other than something that's been consistent since the day he was on campus? He looks like he deserves to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. What sense do you get about the other stuff, the details?
Yeah, it's funny because, if you go back to last season when things started to unravel, one of the things that John Papuchis at the time and probably Odell Higgins to a degree as well, one of the things that they were telling the defensive linemen was, even if you're not happy with the season, even if you don't really care about this season, play for yourself, play for your draft stock, play for, give everything you got, put out good film. Because if you think you're going to go to the NFL next year, which is what Josh Farmer did and Darrell Jackson originally said he was going to do before deciding to come back, at least play for yourself. And I do think Darrell did that like you said, that Miami game. I mean, I'm sure he was motivated also because he used to play at Miami and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes between him and that program. But, there were other games as well where you saw what Darrell Jackson could be. But I think when Mike Norvell talked about challenging him to the idea of, man, don't just come back. Because what happens sometimes when guys come back for their senior year, there sometimes is kind of a plateau where players think, okay, I'm coming back for one more year. Just by coming back, that's going to elevate my stock next year. And I think Mike Norvell correctly told him, no, man, that's not how it works. You have to prove you're better. You're wasting this year if you don't do that. And it sounds like Darrell has really embraced that. And listen, man, I don't think he was a bad guy last year. I don't think he or Farmer were negative guys at practices. We were at practices last year. It's not like Darrell Jackson wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. I think what he's talking about when he says he could have been a better leader is there were a few other guys in that room where they were either drifting or not delivering, and including some of those guys that played a lot of football last year. And I think that's where they not calling each other out, not holding each other to a higher standard. And I get it, man. It's hard to do that if you're losing. It's one thing to do that when you're 13-0 and everybody's pulling in the same direction, everything's going great. But when you're, struggling, you can't even beat average teams at home. It's hard to then be the guy that's going to call out other teammates. So, I wouldn't blame anybody individually, but I think looking back, he realizes he could have been a better leader. And I think he's trying to do that. And I think Terrence Knighton is kind of using that approach of pushing him. They're pushing, James Williams, these guys that are the best players, pushing them as hard as possible because, that they should be able to handle it because they're at the front of the line.
And he should also be seeing, this is an article that's available right now on warchant.com. You wrote, Ira, about Joshua Farmer, somebody that Darrell Jackson is going to be watching very, very closely because they're good friends. But Joshua Farmer's stock after the Combine and the Senior Bowl is going up. And so Darrell Jackson should be all the more alert to, well, it's not like Josh lit it up and the team lit it up last year, but yet the ability can put you in position to make an awful lot of money. What if I have an all ACC type season at defensive tackle, like first team all ACC type season at defensive tackle? I could be making a lot of money right now because Josh Farmer appears to be in better standing now in pro circles.
But you do so much better if you're on a good team. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there are players that get drafted off of really good teams, probably higher than they should because it's just part of being part of a good program, a successful program. You're shining in a better light. You make more plays because you're surrounded by other good players. And when you're on a bad team, sometimes you get drafted lower than you probably should. So you combine those two things. If this team plays a lot better and he does improve, then yeah, it definitely could pay off for him.
Tonight's program, as always, is presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, who brings you excellent insurance coverage if you live in the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, the state of Alabama. He's a diehard Nole, and he's texting us here at Warchant saying, hey, guys, what's going on in practice? Can we get some intel? What's happening? He is as dialed in as any Nole there is, whether you're at Warchant TV listening right now on the podcast audience, whatever your interests are away from Warchant TV. Russ is just like you, man. He's a huge Nole, supports all the programs top to bottom as a booster, Battles End Collective member, scholarship endowments, you name it. Russ Voorhis has been very, very involved, Ira. And again, for our audience out there, if you want to support somebody who has interests like you, then Russ Voorhis is a great place to start with your next insurance quote.
Yeah, I think he texted us when he found out we were going to be shut out of practice. I think he was worried about us a little bit.
He
Maybe
did.
we should have Russ give Mike a call. But yeah, no, Russ, does a really good job. His office, has 3 locations over there. Well, 2 locations over there in Jacksonville, Orange Park, and Jacksonville Beach. And then he's also covers the tri-state area, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Any insurance you needs in those 3 states, call his office or go to the website russvorhis.com, VORHIS.com, and they'll put you in touch with people that can answer any questions you have. And then you might get lucky. You might get Russ on the phone, and you can talk about some Florida State football. Tell him for sure, though, that you heard about him on the Smash and Warchant.
We're going to hit some questions early tonight. Trenton, this one's an easy one. What weekend is the spring game? Asked Trenton. It's the same weekend as Miami's ACC football championship celebration. There isn't one. There isn't one. Sorry, Trenton. No spring game. We are said to be getting access to a scrimmage. We don't have confirmation on what day that would be, unless you've heard a whisper. I can deduce that the candidates are presumably this Saturday, and I can go into why, the following Saturday, April 5th, or the 19th of April, but we're not entirely sure on that trend. But there is no spring game. The reason I say that, Ira, is because those are the days that we're supposed to get the coordinators in addition to Mike Norvell, and that's typically something that follows a scrimmage. So no spring game, but we'll keep you updated as best we can when we know what scrimmage time and access will be. Wes says, Tom and Ira, what's the biggest thing that has stood out based upon what you've heard from interviews so far? So they've done, what is it, about 6-8 interviews so far, Ira, between players and coaches. What has stood out to you so far?
Yeah, so we had the quarterbacks. We had Thomas Castellanos and Brock Glenn. We've had the linebackers, I think, the first day, and we had
James Williams,
and then James Williams and Daryl Jackson. So we've got the linebackers, defensive line, quarterbacks. We were supposed to talk to Jalen Lucas the other day, but we didn't get him, so maybe we'll get him this week. But I think to me the thing that surprised me on a small level, and this is not big picture, was just Jalen Lucas. We'll see how he does throughout the entire spring if they dial it back with him at all. But he's a guy that, he had a season-ending injury early last season. We were really excited about him going back to last spring when he transferred in from Indiana. Man, he was electric. You just watch him at practice, or even the tour of duty. The first time we saw him, you're like, man, that dude can fly. He was very productive at Indiana, both as a receiver and a running back and a special teams guy. And then the season opener, he really didn't get used much. It was weird. Like it was almost like, Norvell kind of forgot about him, or David Johnson, the running backs coach, kind of forgot about him. Then in week 2, they start getting him in and then he gets injured and he's out for the year. So he's kind of a guy that we kind of, just overlook a little bit. But it's been cool to hear them talk about him. It was first back in, tour duty, and then also the first few practices about how dynamic he is. And, I was thinking about this the other day, last year being such a perfect storm, there were a lot of things that went wrong. We've gone over a lot of them, but there were a few injuries that really were kind of like the final nails, I think, to some degree. Him going down for the year, Destin Hill missing the season. There were a few other guys as well that weren't like superstars when they went down with injuries, but clusters of injuries can sometimes have that big of an effect. And when they were as poor as they were at wide receiver last year, those are 2 guys in the passing game that I think really could have been big weapons. So just hearing him just about how fast he's come back from his injury is something that's really kind of perked my ears.
I feel like Destin Hill quickly is going to be somebody who has a remarkable career in some way. And, when I talk to the next generation, I'm like, for real, he was on campus at Florida State and he was this legend. He was never there. And we kept on asking, is Destin Hill actually like, he was actually at Florida State, everybody, kind of like the Randy Moss thing. It's just, it feels like Florida State never got the payoff for all of the patience that they had. For me, the things that stood out to me are tempo and confusion. Tempo on the offensive side, it sounds like it has been prioritized even within the first walkthrough level practice, just no shoulder pads, just helmets on. I asked Gus last week at the luncheon, I said, how fast do you want to go? And he poo-pooed it. And he said, well, we're just installing the basic stuff. Well, that might've been lip service because you're hearing from defenders even before the first day in pads. And they're saying this. James Williams said, this might be the fastest offense we go against all year long in terms of tempo, which I found interesting because they wanted to get the players' attention clearly, Ira.
Yeah, and somebody made this comment to me, and I assume it was made in jest by whoever they heard it from at practice, but somebody threw around the idea of a goal of being able to run 100 plays in a game. And and again, I don't think they're going to run 100 plays in a game, but if that's what you're talking about, it gives you an idea of how fast they want to go. And the cool thing about that, listen, there's a few things that are kind of big takeaways from that. If you do play at that tempo, one is it really cuts down on the substitutions, and that's where we've talked about how Gus Malzahn, basically he'll ride his running back, he'll have one or two go-to receivers. Those are the guys. Well, it's part of the functionality of that offense. You're not substituting, and you're not letting the defense go into other sub packages, and so it is about really identifying who your best players are, the best ways to get them the ball, and then doing it at a high clip until the defense can stop you. And if they stop you, they drop you for a loss or whatever, things like that stall your drive or take away your tempo. Now it's okay. We'll start looking at different packages. But that's the thing, I think that's kind of exciting is if Deuce Robinson is what it sounds like he might be. We're hearing so many good things about him from spring camp. If a guy like obviously the tight end Landon Thomas, what he showed us last year, Squirrel White, who comes in from Tennessee, if Hakeem Williams, if those guys become like legitimate, standout players, and then they're also going to be on the field all the time, well, that should get people kind of excited, because one of the things about this team the last couple of years is, man, there was just so much rotation, especially last year, where nobody really got into a rhythm. I think that's something that I think could be a real positive as well, just getting the best players as many touches as possible.
Yeah, I won't relive that complaint. That was one of mine early. Now, it worked out defensively a couple of years ago because it seemed like they were one of the freshest teams in America. But on offense last year, it's like, good God, why? You'd ask yourself that often, even going back to Dublin. We're all in that outdoor press box together. We're going, that seemed like a good first drive. Why is this guy out automatically? Like, wouldn't you want to keep doing that? Gus won't bail you out in terms of player substitutions. We know that. The idea of 100 plays is interesting to me. That mentality. I don't think you could do it in the running clock era of college football, but that gives you a really good crystallized, image in your head about how things are looking as the offense is going. I'm sure that's from a conditioning standpoint, got some people's attention. And you mentioned it today on the Jeff Cameron Show. It's not just about Ira, physical conditioning. It's also about keeping your mental edge. Play after play after play. That's something that guys are going to have to be able to grow into. So it's probably a good thing that they're doing it so soon in spring camp.
Yeah, and I think it's, in the trade-off to that is obviously the calls are going to be a lot simpler. There's going to be a lot, the plays are going to be simpler. There's got to be a lot of things that accommodate you, that allow you to play that fast. But again, that's, one of the other frustrations I've had, and I think a lot of people have had the last couple of years is it felt like it took a long time for young, talented receivers, young, talented running backs to kind of get into the flow. I don't think Mike Norvell's offense was nearly as complicated as Jimbo Fisher's, but it started to feel like it was kind of going in that direction to where guys were coming in. I mean, I saw a comment in the chat about Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is a guy who came in last year with a lot of talent, big body, made some incredible catches from time to time in practice, but could not get on the field because I don't think he really understood not just what the play was, but how to adjust the play based on what the defense was doing, being on the same page with the quarterback, all those types of things. A lot of those young receivers just had a hard time getting on the field. Luane McCoy, it was much later in the year that we started seeing him and B.J. Gibson and some of those guys. The fact that the offense will be simpler but faster, I think that opens the door to a really talented underclassman. A guy like Javon Boggs, who comes in the spring, very productive in high school, he doesn't have to learn the whole offense, a very complicated offense. I think it'll be much more designed and much more simplistic so that they can go fast.
And then on the other side of the ball, the thing that stood out to me is confusion. This is something where Justin Cryer was talking about. It's good to see that he's moving around, in terms of the photos that we've seen and stuff. He's healthy after getting banged up last season. But you can see in his facial expressions, Ira, like the excitement with the idea of the confusion, the Tony White scheme, that they're never going to line up in the same place twice. They're always going to try to create confusion and angles for themselves and advantages and surprises. that could not be more different than the year prior. If you subscribe to the idea that when things go wrong, hire the opposite guy as the next coach, I think Florida State would be succeeding right now, because from what it sounds like, the linebacker level is going to be very important in sorting out all of those different assignments and plays, back-to-back plays or back-to-back series. It sounds like they're already fully installing the idea of trying to create confusion for offensive lines and quarterbacks and protections.
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting, hearing Cryer talk about, and he's such a smart kid, but he's also a pretty transparent kid. And he'll tell you what he really thinks. A lot of times when we speak to him, we've spoken to him a lot over the last 3 years now. But he just said that he was a little nervous looking at this defense and playing linebacker in it when he heard this scheme was coming in. He did some research because he said it's not really anything he'd ever done before. And so he was a little bit nervous about it. But like to your point, I do think the mental part of it kind of got him excited. And I think, just talking to Patrick Surtain about the DBs, it sounds like they're taking a similar approach. Whether or not, again, the defense played perfectly fine the year before when you had NFL corners. Renardo Green has had a very, very good rookie year in the NFL. Jarian Jones played a ton as a rookie in the NFL. You had a lot of guys on that defense that had that ability to play press man all the time, but still play great. These guys, I think they're talented. These young DBs that they have going across the board, they're very talented, but this whole defense didn't make plays last year. They didn't create turnovers, didn't even break up a ton of passes. And, Patrick Surtain talked about the fact that they're going to mix up defenses, play more zone, do things to give the DBs a chance to turn around and see the quarterback, see the play, not just be chasing wide receivers and phase all day. And that could, that's something that I think the DBs are excited about. We've heard some really good things about, across the Jabril Rawls. We've heard a lot of good things about him and Earl Little. I think Quindarius Jones is going to fit really well in this kind of scheme. So I think that whole defense is probably pretty excited about these changes.
It'll be interesting. I saw this comment from Greg a little bit ago. Fast tempo, speaking on offense, has pros and cons, because if it stalls, it puts the defense right back on the field. Man, these are two very different sides of the ball. I get that, there is a lot of similarity between some of the principles of Gus Malzahn's offense and Mike Norvell's offense, but not at this clip. And then defensively, you're asking for something that's very, very different. I mean, Ira, we know it is, and we've covered it, and we talked about it leading into spring camp. But now that you're hearing it out of the players' mouths, like, this is really going to look, once they get in front of the fans, this operation of Florida State football, when they're not in special teams and they're in the two major phases of the ball, this is going to look drastically different in the fall on both sides.
Yeah, it definitely is. Not just because of the personnel, but like you said, the schemes. The other part of to his point, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of playing a breakneck tempo on offense. We've seen what happens when it doesn't go well, and that's certainly understandable. I would say this, though. Because of the style of defense, I actually think we'll see how it works out. But just hearing how much they're going to do defensively in terms of trying to create big plays, looking at what Tony White's defenses have done in the past at Nebraska and Syracuse, I think it's going to be kind of a high risk, high reward defense. And so I felt like there were times under Adam Fuller where it was a lot more low risk, low reward on defense. And, he was not very aggressive with blitz packages. He was not super, safeties played a lot too high. It seemed like they were trying to keep everything in front of them, which it worked in certain cases. I think this defense is going to be much more attacking. It's going to be much more trying to create plays, create negative plays, create turnovers. Because of that, I don't know that the defense is going to be on the field for an 8-minute drive. Now, maybe you're playing a team that just executes incredibly well, and they've got a power running game, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be out there for a while. I have a feeling this defense is going to force the issue. So you may have a situation where the offense goes 3 and out, but you may have a situation when then the defense comes out and either creates a big play or puts the other team in a negative situation, and they've got to take some risks. So I think that part of it makes me feel a little bit better, as opposed to if you had a high tempo offense and then a defense that plays kind of read and react, which again is what we saw a lot of under Adam Fuller.
So what you're saying is you don't think there's going to be any more one-possession quarters at Florida State?
I do not, man. I just think, don't you think? I think Tony White's going to force the issue. And so, I do not expect that to be the case.
We'll see what it all looks like, and we're documenting that right here on Warchant TV. Remember to sign up at warchant.com. Excellent special available to you, over 50% off for your membership at warchant.com, plus $20 to Garnet and Gold, the last locally owned Florida State apparel shop in the business. So you're supporting Noles, once again, not just us at warchant.com if you sign up for a membership today. We've got more questions coming on the other side of this break. We're going to talk to you about what it means to be a Warchant Premier member in that break after this word from our sponsor, State Farm agent Russ Forres.
Contact Russ Forres for an auto quote today.
Stop fighting the algorithm. You know you can't get enough Florida State filling your feed. Well, there's no better way to keep up with FSU on YouTube than with members-only level Warchant. It's going to get you bigger, faster, and stronger. How? Bigger.
It's hour number 2.
Join now for exclusive access to a bonus segment of the legendary Seminole headlines.
Faster.
Get debut access days in advance of the public release of the latest episode of X's and O's with Dominic Robinson, a look at the All-22 film.
Stronger.
Utilize the Member Milestone Chat, a new feature which allows your comment to be highlighted in live chats during Warchant.com shows for maximum visibility. All of this in addition to members-only flair like badges, emojis, and polls to drive the conversation of the home of the Ultimate Seminole Sports Source on YouTube. Give it a try. Cancel it anytime. No commitments, no phone calls, no emails. Just a few clicks within your YouTube account. Warchant.com members only YouTube. The next level in FSU coverage on YouTube.
Back here on the Monday Smash, Noletastic. He's a member, Warchant Premier. Thank you, Noletastic. And he says, great video with Gene. Thank you very much, Noletastic. That's available now on Warchant TV after you're done watching this program. Gene has some buzz and intel around Florida State's future in the ACC. Be sure to check that out. It is a good discussion. And Garrett PCL with a question tonight, also a member of Warchant Premier. Thank you very much for your support, Garrett. What are the whispers on how Mike is handling the CEO position? Is he floating around more than usual? Does it seem like it's an adjustment for him? Hashtag Silver Fox o'clock. Very nice, Garrett PCL. Any thoughts, Ira, or whispers about how Mike is handling, not having play-by-play responsibilities of the offense in the 24-period practice?
It's a good question. I was actually thinking about that earlier today, that I haven't talked to a lot of people about that. So I don't have a lot of information. The one thing I would say though is, the premonition or the belief we had that this was going to be Gus Malzahn's offense has only been confirmed by everything we've heard. I mean, this is, now there are some similarities, and he'll talk about the terminology isn't that different and all that, but it is clearly Gus Malzahn's offense. He is running the show, and I think that's across the board. Now, Mike Norvell, I'll say this about him, even though it was his offense, and, Tom, you can vouch for this too, because you've been in practice for the last few years as well. Even though it was his offense, and even though that's where he put most of his emphasis, he was always a head coach that got around. Like, he would go around to different position groups throughout practice. Now, when they were in a team setting, he would have the headset on, he'd be calling plays. But when it came to, 80 to 85% of practice is not 11-11. It's certainly not good on good. So in those segments, he's always done a really good job of getting around, much more than Jimbo. I felt like Jimbo, from the times we saw it, Jimbo is pretty much what the quarterbacks seem like all the time. So I do think, though, I think he's embracing the opportunity. I think the biggest difference, if you were going to ask me, like, what's the biggest change? I think the biggest change is away from practice. Instead of having to prepare, like to sit down over the last few years, Mike Norvell would sit down with Alex Atkins and really work through the practice schedule, what they were going to be working on, game plan during the week, all the things they're working on. He doesn't have to sit there for that now. He can get briefed on it later, the way Coach Bowden would have, but he didn't have to sit there and like draw it up, basically, play by play. And I think that's allowing him more time to have these individual conversations with players who are having trouble. Maybe if a position coach says, hey, coach, I noticed that this player seemed to be out of it today, or this player had this issue today, he can go follow that up and spend that time that way. So I think it's on the field. I don't think it's going to be a much big difference, but I think it's the time between practices and between games. That's where I think you'll see him really flex that muscle, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I would say the one place where you're going to see, well, we won't, but like he will have more time in practice is actually getting into the fall and getting into game weeks. You're out there for a hell of a lot more of those than I was, Ira, but, install, like Mike is watching install of the offense very closely when they're working with scout teams, and that's a lot of periods of practice during game week.
That's a good point. Yeah,
he won't have to do that now. That's not now. That's not spring. Right. But I'm thinking about moments where he's locked into offensive coordinator mode, and Tuesday. Well, they allowed us in Tuesday, Wednesday, but Monday through Thursday, if they do whatever installs and walkthroughs, he can walk over to the defensive side of the field now and take a temperature of how that's going. That's something he was really never able to do before. So that would be, Garrett, a moment where I would think he'd have a little bit more time. But I agree with you, Ira. I think this is more about what you do away from the practice fields and time management for Mike Norvell in CEO mode.
And get back to what I was saying about why I have zero doubt at all this is 100% Gus Malzahn's offense. It's just listening to the other players and the other coaches talk about, just they're relaying things that Gus says. They're taking, again, when players and coaches are really kind of singing from the same hymnal, so to speak, it's when they all say the same things. They're all saying the same things that Gus says. And so to me, it's very clear he is the voice on offense right now. And now on game day, I'm sure he'll have some input. Mike Norvell will have input, but it is clearly Gus Malzahn's offense.
Greg Turner asks, could we see more of Keziah Holmes this year? Feels like he's been getting leapfrogged on the roster in his time here. Greg, we never did a retrospective on the Warchant Top 40 because that would have been a disaster as the season was. But I was a Keziah Holmes guy. I still am a low-key Keziah Holmes guy. I loved what I saw to him last spring. I thought he brought a great combination of toughness, pass pro, explosiveness with the ball in his hand. He had an unfortunate fumble early in fall last year, but, they still were rotating a bunch of bodies, and Keziah wasn't in that regular rotation. They sure found time for Cam Davis or Sam Singleton. I hope so, but the problem here, and we talked about this, Ira, is when Gus finds a guy, he kind of just sticks with that guy, so that's going to be a tough deal for Keziah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's an interesting topic. And I will say this, though. I do think it's going to help him maybe having Gus Malzahn here, just a fresh set of eyes. Yeah. Because I do feel like, for whatever reason, if it was the fumble, maybe he had a drop pass, it seemed like he was not relied upon. And when they went to him, it was kind of like a desperation move, like somebody else is banged up. They've had a couple guys winded or whatever it was. All right, let's give Keziah a chance. But he was almost really an afterthought, especially after that fumble early in the year. So maybe a fresh set of eyes. Maybe Gus Malzahn says, you know what? Why aren't we playing 26 more? So maybe he gets a chance that way. I do think, to your point though, that is going to be the challenge for all these guys because I'm riding with Usman Kroma when he gets here, the freshman out of Georgia. We'll see what happens when he gets here in May and he gets to go through those preseason practices. But if he is what he's supposed to be, I think he's going to end up being the guy as the season goes on. Maybe not against Alabama, maybe not the first couple of weeks, but I think he may end up being the guy. And then, guys will be fighting even more for playing time.
Yeah, and so a similar question from CFB Central, and you mentioned this, that you saw the Elijah Moore question earlier, but he's saying, what are the expectations we should have for Elijah Moore? Same issue is if Gus has a hierarchy, and clearly Deuce Robinson is going to be at the top of that list, and so is Squirrel White. I suppose there's a battle for wide receiver 3,
for sure.
But you just wonder about, formationally speaking, how often Florida State's going to be in 3 wide or 4 wide. If you're down the depth chart, you have to really work under Gus Malzahn's offense to go get those reps. And that's where Elijah Moore in his second year on campus, he's got some impressing to do, Ira, especially because Gus likes Javon Boggs. And so even though you're in your second year and you have all this potential and you were a heralded recruit from the year prior, there's a new set of eyes that's making the decisions. And so a lot of work for Elijah Moore ahead. He's got the gifts, but it'll be interesting to hear.
But that's the part, though. I think Gus Malzahn seems like much more of a players, not plays kind of coordinator. And so, there are not that many people with that skill set. And again, this is where I was critical of the offensive coaching staff last year's. You had some guys that had some talent that you couldn't get on the field. Well, get them on the field. Find out a way. Change what you've got to change to get them out there, because you're rolling out a bunch of guys who are not playmakers. And, so you talk about the number 3 wide receiver position, and they will go 4 wide sometimes as well. But that's, to me, Hakeem Williams has not proven he's going to be a playmaking wide receiver. He had a really nice play his freshman year when he got that ball and kind of cut it over the middle and showed some really good speed. But in terms of going up and getting the ball, making contested catches, that has not been something he's really shown. It's not his fault necessarily. He came from a high school that was not very good. He didn't have a ton of polish when he got here as a receiver. He's still learning, and maybe that light comes on for him. But I've seen Elijah Moore make some of those catches in practice. So if you have a simpler offense and you have that kind of athletic ability, it wouldn't shock me if he finds a way to get into the rotation, because there aren't that many dudes with that skill set.
Well, it wasn't just us and the recruiting community, but when he first signed, or the media community hyping him up. I mean, Florida State put a video out from their scrimmage showing that very ability to go up and catch the ball last fall when he finally got here on campus. So we'll see if Gus says, "What are you guys doing with Elijah Moore and Keziah Holmes? Why weren't you playing these guys?" That would be one of those strange things where I would agree with Gus. I'd be like, "All right, Gus, you agree on that one. Thank you for freeing Keziah Holmes." Thanks for those questions, guys. Jack asks, and I saw you posted the second part of this on the Tribal Council today, Ira, so I'm interested in your answers. Will the football facility and the stadium renovations be done by this fall? And then also, what are the talks about a new Jumbotron? And will that be delayed? I'm assuming is what you're saying, Jack. So, Ira, just on the financials and the logistics and the construction, what updates do you have and what do you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's all going really well. From what, from everything we've seen, if you go out there and see it, it's obviously they've made a ton of progress. But the dates, the last dates we were given, this was a couple of weeks ago from Michael Alford, the athletic director, was the stadium would be ready by, beginning of August, at some point, maybe late July. And so they're going to have several weeks before the season actually starts to where the stadium construction will be done. They're going to be able to host some events there. And that's something I was really excited to hear, because I did feel like they needed to have some kind of dry runs in that building before the Alabama game. And it sounds like they've got some things. Now, they may not be open to us. It may not be open to the public. We'll see. It may just be for high-level boosters. I'm not sure exactly what their plans are, but they are planning some events in the month of August leading up to the game, and the stadium will be ready by then. So that's awesome news. The indoor facility is also going to be ready at some point in August, but probably not till later August. And because it won't be ready for the start of preseason camp, which will start probably around the 1st of August, or maybe the end of July, they won't. The team won't move in to that building until the bye week, which is I think like 3 weeks into the season. So they'll use it. They'll be practicing in that facility. They'll be practicing. It'll look like it's new, and they'll be practicing, but they're not going to move into the locker rooms yet. They probably won't be using all of the facilities yet, the weight room and all that, until they get to that break. Just the way that deadline is going to work. But as far as the Jumbotron, they've been doing work over the stadium on the big screens right now. What came out today, there was a Board of Governors meeting this week, and the agenda came out. In the agenda, the Florida State's asking for approval to basically spend up to $25 million or so on a new Jumbotron big screen replay board. And that was already greenlit by FSU, the FSU trustees, because they've got extra money. Basically what happened is they took out $265 million, $270 million, I can't remember the exact figure, in loans to do the stadium construction. Well, they're coming in under budget. So they've got like an extra $25, $30 million. So they're wanting to repurpose that to a new Jumbotron, which wasn't in the original plan. So I'm sure that'll get approved. It's not like the Board of Governors is going to say no. But I don't know if that's going to be ready for the season. I don't know they may already be doing that, but now they just need to get approval after the fact. But it sounds like that's something here in the near future.
That's interesting. So, yeah, they came in that far under budget. That's always a good thing. Fiscal responsibility there. Is Jumbotron kind of like a pseudonym for football roster and NIL? That would be my follow-up question. Could that be 25 million repurposed to roster over the next year or two?
That's that's certainly one way people would want to look at it. Listen, man, that replay board was rough last year. So actually both of them. So hopefully they're making some progress there.
I like how we all have our own battles that we fight on that front. And I think that's you and Corey on the replay booth, because you guys have to look at it and look at it again and go and just shake your damn heads. I, like you too, have a mind for logistics and events. I'm glad to hear that there are dry runs being done. You don't want Alabama to be the first game when you have people trotting out new point of sale systems and working the suites, going back and forth through the hallways. Something doesn't work in the beer area or the cocktail area. Smart that Florida State would hold some events. So there you go, Jack. There is the latest on Florida State facilities. A question from what would appear a parent, and if so, hello, Mr. Nash. He says, what have you heard about young true freshman Mario Nash Jr., says Mario Nash. If this is, in fact, Dad, hello, Dad. Welcome to Warchant TV. We hope you're enjoying this product, and we hope that we have glowing reports about Mario Nash Jr. for years to come. We have photographic evidence that your son was at practice last week, Mr. Nash, and there is young Mario. It's probably too early to tell, unless you've heard something specific, Ira. One day of pads, it's hard to hear anything about offensive linemen who are 4th and 5th year players, let alone true freshmen. But there is a photo image of Florida State's youngest offensive lineman, a young tackle. Anything you've heard of on Mario Nash Jr., Ira?
I was going to say, and I think Dad's a coach. I think it's Coach Nash.
Oops, sorry, Nash. My bad, Coach.
We've heard great things about him as a person. I have not heard a ton yet about practice, but honestly, I haven't heard a ton yet about the offensive line individually from those reps. Now, in the past, Tom and I would have been out there, and Tom especially would have been watching the one-on-one reps. He wouldn't need to worry about how they're doing in team. No. Tom would have been over there watching the one-on-one reps and the 2-on-2 and the twist game and all that stuff. But we're not out there right now. I haven't heard anything specifically. I will say that everybody talks really highly of Mario as a young man. The fact that he stuck with Florida State with his commitment after, there was a coaching change, especially at his position. A lot of other, players at that position left, and Mario stuck with Florida State. So I think he's a popular guy around the team, for that reason as much as anything else.
The question from Premier member Dave Doherty. Dave, thank you very much for this question. He's interested in basketball, which I've seen. I don't know, Ira, sometimes we let you peek behind the curtain here on Warchant TV. I've been impressed with the response. People are watching Luke Lauk's videos. Okay, folks, we'll continue to cover the program with vigor with this change. Ira and I worked and collaborated. He directed some of the cuts from Luke Lauk's extended availability from last week. You can go check that out on our channel right now. Lauk's talking about everything as it relates to the state of his program, the transition for Florida State from Leonard Hamilton to his regime. It's good stuff. It's just around a half an hour's worth of talking back and forth. Dave wants to know when we get pressers from the new coaches like Michael Fly and some of the other hires that are coming in.
Yeah, they do have 2 assistant coaches on staff. That will be coming, but man, they are going 120 miles an hour in the transfer portal right now. People probably realize that the transfer portal for basketball opened up today for men's basketball. It opens up for women's basketball tomorrow, and they are going after it. I've heard that they've got at least 50, probably more targets in the portal that they're really kind of honed in on. They've been working on this. Even though Michael Fly was officially announced and Coach Gillian were officially announced by Luke late last week in that press conference, they've been kind of working behind the scenes already. They've been doing a lot of research. The support staff's been doing a lot of research, knowing guys who are going to be in the portal and then guys who they thought might go in the portal, doing all that legwork. And so now today the portal is open. Guys are going in, and it is a race. Just like we've heard so much from Mike Norvell over the years for football transfers, about how important it was that Mike Norvell and that staff were one of the first ones to call to get in the process. Basketball's trying to do the same thing. They're already lining up visits. Matt Lasser is actually covering this pretty heavily for us. To your point about the interest in basketball right now with a coaching change, some new blood, some fresh blood, there's a lot of excitement in the program right now. So Matt is actually kind of pulling him off of football recruiting right now to really focus on basketball transfer portal activity. There's a thread on the message boards on the Hoops board right now that he's going to be updating constantly with new offers, new visits, guys they're trending with. And it sounds like, I think he was telling me today, there's already one of these transfers that sounds like they're in a really good position to get a commitment out of. So that's going to be coming fast and furious. Once that settles down, this is a 1 month window. If we don't get a chance to talk to those guys before then, when the 1 month transfer portal window closes, we'll definitely be doing that.
Appreciate the question, Dave. So we'll keep you updated here on warchant.com, Warchant TV on hey, Mike. Thank you very much. How's it going? Hashtag Mike got us still. I like that he's sticking with that. Jeff asks, guys, we have a lot of 1-year rentals out of the portal this year, and I think we're going to be good. But what about next year? Are we going to need another year of portal power? It feels like once you start down that path, you must keep going down that path in terms of the portal. I don't see why they wouldn't need to go into the portal for next year, Jeff, especially with it's the lag effect, Ira, I think, of having new coaches. They put their own eyes on the program and they see what they actually on the field through camps of what they need, what they're missing. I could see them being active in the spring window that comes up here shortly, but then also next year, they do have a lot of veteran dudes that they brought in through the portal. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, though, there are some positions I think you could look at and say, okay, if these guys play pretty well and don't leave because they got a better offer somewhere else or something. And Florida State's been really good about that. If they've got players that are valued highly, the Battle's End, they've done a great job of roster retention. So it hasn't been a huge problem. But looking at some positions, wide receiver, there's a lot of young talent there. Defensive back, there's a lot of young talent there. When I say young, I mean first, second, third year guys that would have more eligibility and probably are not going to the NFL right away after this season. So I think, there are some positions, tight ends, another one, Landon Thomas is going to be a sophomore. Amari Williams is going to be a sophomore. There are players, that could be really good players and key players who I think you'll have multiple years with, but then there are other positions that, offensive line, certainly a bunch of 1-year rentals there. And I think linebacker, I think there, to some degree, you might be having to replace some older guys there. But to your point, yeah, Tom, I just think this is the reality. Unless you're, the elite of the elite, Ohio State, and even they go heavy in the portal. Georgia, a couple of programs like that. Yeah, everybody's playing this game. And now it may settle down if the House settlement happens. We've talked about this before. The House settlement happens and gets approved. Players allegedly, apparently, reportedly, we'll see it when we believe it, are going to have these multi-year contracts. And so you may have a guy in your roster that you feel you're going to have for several years, and maybe it goes back a little bit from what it's been these last few years.
One can hope that that's the way it goes. We'll see. You're right. If I was a kid right now, the way it is, and I was any good at all, if we had a little bit of money in my family, I didn't need to lock into a longer term. I go 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, because right now, just that's the way it seems to be shaken out for the top flight guys. Jamming 2 shirts. All right, we'll go with that. It seems Mike needs to become a better recruiter to survive. Do you see him getting better yet? Well, yeah, I think that's related to the philosophy of Mike Norvell and the staff. They closed very strong last go-around. Nobody likes to hear that because they were in like the 40s and the 50s with 2 wins, but they did creep inside the top 20. But, yeah, frankly, this staff, it's to be determined because it's a brand new staff with 2 new coordinators. So if we're sitting here in December and, Florida State has, let's say, an 8-9 win successful season and they're 16th or 17th in recruiting, that would be a problem because then you wouldn't have to lean on the portal nearly as much.
I think they are trying to be more aggressive. I think this staff is trying to be more aggressive. They were on the road a lot more. It seemed like much more active in January, trying to set the stage for those February visits, and they had a lot of kids on. They have not been knocking it home with a bunch of commitments. But I don't know, man, if you're coming off a 2-10, I think the best you can hope for with a lot of these recruitments, and listen, man, they're in on it. I'll give them credit for this. They're in it with a bunch of, high-level players, 4-stars, even some 5-star guys that they're in it for. But I don't think they're not able to close any of those deals or get a commitment right now because I think a lot of these players, the best they're getting is they want to see it in the fall. Now we'll see. Now the summer now is when most of the commitments happen. That's when most of the official visits happen. If they knock it out of the park and somehow get 10, 12, 15 commitments in the summer, that would be awesome. But I think at the end of the day, man, they're still going to have a hard time closing a lot of these guys until people see the product on the field. Yes, you fired a bunch of coaches. Yes, you brought in a bunch of new coaches, but people still, I think, are going to want to see proven the proof on the field.
100% agree. Carol asks, hope all is well. It is. Ira, how are things with you? Are things all right?
Very good, Carol.
Okay, yeah. I wonder if you'll be shocked in a positive way after seeing the first scrimmage, and which we do not know the date yet of what scrimmage we're going to see. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you predict? I think it will look better with a faster offense running the ball and receivers catching the ball. Interested to see the defense with its new schemes too. Do you think it will be stronger and better? Well, 2 and 10 was bad, so that is a first point I would make. I think it'll be different. So I'm just going to predict if we get a date and we go in and we see a scrimmage, I think we're going to be shocked at how different things look, even though we know it is going to look schematically different on both sides of the ball or tempo-wise. I think we'll still be shocked at how it looks, Ira, but I don't know if I can say specifically on the success level that they're going to have. But it's just they're not trying the same thing and running it back this year. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, the thing, the thing that was interesting about last year, and people ask us all the time, did they look that terrible when you watched them in practice? How did they look that bad on the field? You guys obviously didn't know what you were seeing. And again, I'll go back to not just Nick Saban's comments, but players that NFL guys that, EJ Manuel, other NFL guys that came and watched practices that were impressed. The ACC network crew, not just EJ Manuel, but also Mac Lane. Nobody walked away thinking these practices looked terrible. I will say this, as the season went on though, it got worse and worse. I felt like the practices were starting to spiral. You saw less intensity. You started seeing more guys kind of showing a little bit of attitude. You saw less focus. The practices did get worse as the year went on. So I think that's the last thing that's been in our minds for me and you, like seeing that product on the field, seeing those practices. If it goes back to just looking competent and decent and maybe just above average, I think we're going to be grading on such a curve that we're going to be like, wow, this is so much better than last year. So I think, Carol, you're going to hear, my guess is you're going to hear a lot of very positive comments. But I think that's because of just what we saw especially the second half of last year, including in practices.
Yeah, agreed. I'll always say this. I'm not changing it. This was just the truth. Nothing stood out in camps to me in a negative way that said this team's going to be awful. They weren't as good as their predecessors. That was the first time I think in Mike Norvell's tenure that you could tell that there's not as much talent as the year prior. Whereas, the access that we had post-COVID, it was like they got better every camp, every spring, every fall. It was this trajectory going up, 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 and away. This was the first time it didn't look like that, but it didn't look like it was 2 and 10. And shoot, it didn't look like it was going 6 and 6. So, say that we don't know what we're looking at if you want, but I'm telling you, I think you agree, Ira. The practices didn't look like stepchildren.
Even I brought up on Jeff's show today, like when at Pro Day, DJ looked pretty good. Like he looked good. He was completing passes. He was throwing accurately with velocity and touch and making all the throws. And I talked to several different people afterwards and they're like, DJ looked pretty good. And it's almost like people forgot that he actually was a pretty good quarterback before. He was never great, but he was a pretty good quarterback those last 2 years. Last year at Clemson and 1 year at Oregon State. Last year was a disaster on the field for that whole team, that offensive line, that receiving core. It was just a complete abomination. But we didn't see DJ look just lost in practices the way he may have looked at times in games. So, yeah, man, listen, man, no, people aren't going to believe us, and that's fine. We'll just go to our deathbed, tell them, I'll be on my deathbed telling my wife and kids that, 2024, they weren't that bad. I promise.
Yeah, it's not thou doth protest too much. I'm secure in my belief of what I saw. And then we all saw what we saw after together as a group, and we went, what the hell is this? Eddie Boozda, thank you for the contribution. Quick tangent. Who's going further in the postseason, baseball or softball? Go Noles. Do you have a pick right now? Good week for softball last week, Ira, where they get ranked victories on the road against Alabama, and then they sweep Duke. So nice momentum right now for Lonnie's squad.
Yeah, man, that really was. And I think it's hard I don't want to be a cop-out, but it's kind of a tie because I think they both are certainly World Series worthy. Baseball, usually is more of a crapshoot because, you go down to a best of 3 series and you get matched up with an SEC team or whatever, and you certainly could lose it. But I feel like with Jamie Arnold and these 2 other starters that they have, they're going to be in a great shape to win a super regional and then, maybe get to Omaha. But softball, if they're going to pitch the way they've been pitching, and this has kind of been pretty consistent, like even when they lost those games out at Oregon, they were like 1-0 and 2-0.
Yeah.
This is a different deal. And with that offense, I have a hard time seeing them lose short of going to the Women's World Series. So I think it's about a draw, man. I hate to be a cop out, but I don't really see one as much stronger than the other.
I'm nervous right now, and for baseball in a regional setting, not in a super regional setting, but in a regional setting, because if they have to play a 4th and a 5th game,
get deep in the pen.
Yeah. I mean, Evan Crest, as it turns out, was pretty valuable, and that pen has been inconsistent. Whereas I think softball is trending stronger right now. They're neck and neck. We should get some, and I know Eddie does PA. We should have some awesome times in a couple months with regionals and super regionals. I would expect Florida State to at least host a regional in both sports. Put it that way. Before we sign off, a TGL specific question. Sorry about this one, Ira. Jack says, Tom.
Real quick, I'm sorry. And I got to meet Eddie a few weeks ago at a softball game. And
nice.
Cool to talk to him.
He's in a very popular golf league in the Tallahassee area too, apparently.
Right.
So I'll see him at a tournament at a time not too far from now. A specific question. I'll get past this and we'll promo and talk about what's coming up at warchant.com. TGL finals tonight for the SoFi Cup, Ira. NYC or ATL? The answer is NYC because Justin Thomas and Billy Ho are going to be drowning in their sorrows from the Valspar Championship. There you go, Jack. Appreciate the question. What's coming up on Warchant TV and Warchant.com, Ira? I know tomorrow's another practice day, but we've got a lot of content outside of just practice reports.
Yeah, still a lot of recruiting, man. Still a lot of recruiting to catch up on from over the weekend. In fact, I've got a story about a 4-star wide receiver from Naples, Pettit, I think is his last name, or Petit, that Michael wrote. I'll be putting that up on the site in a minute. We've already had other stories on those guys earlier. And then he's got a recruiting wrap that's going to go up. And then, and then more football content going into practice tomorrow because they don't practice till late afternoon. I think we'll be out there 3 or 4 to probably get some pictures, some videos of guys getting to practice again. And then the interviews at 6:30. But we'll have a little bit more football coverage during the day from the interviews we've gotten in the last few days. So, yeah, nonstop, man, nonstop. And the basketball portal stuff, again, I'm telling you, if you're interested at all at what this roster is going to look like, and, if you had 13 scholarship players last year, I think Florida State may keep 3 or 4 of them, maybe 2 or 3. So that's going to be a whole new roster, and we'll be covering that extensively. They are still recruiting a couple high school kids as well, but there's going to be a huge emphasis on the portal with over the next few weeks.
It's extremely busy right now, and be sure to check out the Hodgepodge if you haven't yet on Warchant TV. Great features from our own Aslan Hodgevandi with practice wraps, and those are going to be you have said yes to them in the comment sections and on the message boards, so those are going to keep on coming. Those are entertaining ways to pass the time as we're here in spring.
One last little FSU nugget of news that came out today. There's been some friction apparently between Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare, TMH, and the city of Tallahassee. There's kind of some bickering going on. And FSU, President McCullough came out and posted a letter basically saying that Florida State's interested in maybe partnering with TMH and turning into a teaching hospital, into a research hospital, which they're already doing something along those lines. They're doing a project together that's already been in the process. But basically like a partnership or FSU taking over TMH. And again, we're talking about sports mostly, but when you talk about if something like that were to happen, what that would mean for Florida State University, and then you see the spinoff at other schools where if the university has some great success, a lot of times that can work the other way also and help athletics. It's something to keep an eye on. I don't know how realistic that is, but that just came out a couple hours ago, and that's something to really keep an eye on.
That's one thing I've seen, Ira, just in these board meetings, and I know this wasn't necessarily in a board meeting setting, but, paying attention to all this ACC chatter and lawsuits and so forth. We watched a lot more minutes of the board meetings than we probably wanted to, and I know you've done that for years anyway, but there are a lot of projects that Florida State has cooking as a university to try and increase its academic profile even more than it has been in the last 10 or 15 years, which does make you more attractive. It's better than being a school with very low SAT, ACT scores. You don't have to be AAU. I know people keep saying that about the Big Ten. You don't have to be. But
and they're trying to get there, but yeah.
But you kind of have to try. And Florida State's trying very hard, and they're succeeding at making it very difficult to get into the university. So there you go. There's your academic minute here on the Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voris. Seminole Headlines will be live on this channel tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Wake Up Warchant back in full flight here on Warchant TV as we're into the busier season, and your podcast feeds. It's always around, but it's around a lot more often these days. Florida State takes on Florida tomorrow night in baseball as well. Check out warchant.com's baseball board for updates, because I don't think we're getting any video of that, folks.
Apparently not a stream, and I've heard heard the ACC network is who chose not to stream that. So Florida State's home game. So
okay.
So, yeah.
This has been an issue intermittently over the years. It's like, who wants to pay for it? Who wants to pay for the stream? So we got deadbeats in the ACC. Go figure. All right.
Times are tough.
Yeah, so be sure. We'll paint the picture for you on the message boards tomorrow during that game.
And you can always listen to Lulu. He does a great job on the FSU Game Day app, which you can get on your phone, or locally here in town. I think it's 100.7, 100.7. I think it's usually what baseball's on.
That's it, man. 15 years ago, 16 years ago, your boy right here was working the boards in those WFLA studios.
There you go.
So for Ira, I'm Tom, Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes. Thank you very much for producing this program. And to our sponsor, State Farm agent Russ Voris, thanks for always sponsoring the Monday Smash. If you enjoyed the program, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to Warchant TV. It's absolutely free. And we will talk to you next time real soon right here. Good night, Ira.
Good night.